According to research conducted by the Pew Research Center, it found that nearly two-thirds of Americans, 63%, believe it's better for society if the public is skeptical of both the media and business. Scott Baradell has participated in a growing trend among journalists trading in the privilege of asking questions for a career in public relations, helping businesses build brands. Baradell's mission is to help businesses build brands and trust during a time of distrust and skepticism. It's the mission of Trust Signals, a marketing and public relations methodology developed by Baradell, who now spends his days as the CEO of Idea Grove, one of the top 25 tech PR firms in the United States. At his core, Baradell is a writer and entrepreneur who grew his PR firm, Idea Grove, through the interest he generated through a blog. Baradell joined me this week to discuss his rise in public relations, the current state of the journalistic industry, and how he helped others build a brand and get over their skepticism. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn how to help businesses build trust in a time of skepticism. Great to see you this morning, and thank you so very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're most welcome. And Scott, I'm curious to ask you how you do what you do, helping businesses build trust in a time of skepticism. I'm wondering if you can tell me more.
Yeah, absolutely. I came from journalism, which of course is a field that is generating a lot of skepticism these days. But when I went into PR, what PR has always attempted to do is mostly using media sources that were, in the old days at least, pretty widely trusted. The New York Times was all the news that's fit to print and so forth. The Walter Cronkite back in the day, and everyone watched the evening news on the big networks. Back then, PR people could get their message of their clients through these outlets, and just by nature of the fact that those media outlets were trusted, it would confer trust on your client. So you could earn trust by earning media coverage that would show, hey, these guys are legit, they're credible, there's something of interest. And what's changed is in today's world, the media has become so fragmented, and people's opinions about so many things have become so polarized that where you've got a big segment of people who still rely on the New York Times, you've got a lot of other people who don't trust the New York Times. And you can go up and down the line about almost any source of information, whether it's media or an influencer or a site where you see customer reviews. So how we counsel people is there's so many sources of influence today, and audiences are so different in terms of what sources of influence that they rely on, that you really have to start by understanding your audience and who they trust, rather than assuming that just because you got a coverage in some media source that's going to help build trust for your business. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's way more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, as you know, I originally went to school to become a sports reporter. So I'm fascinated as to in which ways do you think covering stories has improved, and which ways do you think that could stand to be improved? I'm fascinated to get your answer.
Just the coverage of just media coverage in general, like journalism.
Journalism in general.
Yeah.
How has it shifted in your opinion? Yeah.
Well, I've been in it a long time, and I was a editor of my college magazine at University of Virginia, and after that, I went straight into newspapers. I wrote for a number of publications as a freelancer, including national publications and things. So I did that for a number of years. So I definitely have experience in that earlier era, hands-on, versus today, where I've worked with media outlets and I'm a consumer of media. I would say that, unfortunately, the biggest changes have not been for the better. The biggest change is simply that the way that the economy of media is structured, there's not enough money for media outlets to pay journalists and keep the staff of journalists that they should have to cover what they're trying to cover. And so, for example, I live in Dallas, Texas. The Dallas Morning News continues to shrink its staff. It's probably half of what it was 20 years ago, which was reduced from what it was 10 years before that. What that means is, when I was a reporter, you had someone dedicated to covering the school board. You had someone dedicated to covering city council. You had all these, what they called beats, that were very specific. And the reporter got really into it and really understood it and could really drill down. And today, you might have the same person covering what used to be 6 or 7 different beats. So just by nature of that, it's impossible to go as in depth. The other thing that's a negative in my mind is, it used to be that because the big newspapers or TV outlets in a town were kind of the only game in town, and there wasn't a lot of competition, they could stand to do some things they felt a responsibility to their communities to do things like, let's, for example, say, cover the school board. The school boards, they do important things, but the truth is that those stories are not clickbait. That's not the first thing people click on. They'd rather click on something silly or controversial or just that's going to get their attention. And so that kind of meat and potatoes stuff in journalism has suffered. I would say the thing that has improved is, there are benefits to not just having this small number of gatekeepers that are deciding what's news and what's not. And when everyone can get out there and have a platform, and you've got a variety of ways to get in front of people, it's going to challenge the conventional wisdom. So that's really good. I just wish that journalistic organizations that really strive to do things like explanatory journalism, investigative journalism, in-depth journalism, that they had more resources to do it. That's my biggest regret about the changes. Hopefully, though, and a big reason for that is simply that all of the media that we consume today, we're mostly consuming it through platforms like Google and Facebook, Apple, all the big technology firms, Twitter, and they're all skimming off the top big time. So they take all this money in advertising, and the media companies that produce the journalism that is earning advertising dollars for Facebook, Google, and so forth, they're getting a small percentage of that. So you've got these big tech companies making loads of money off of journalism that is not as well financed, partly because of all the money that the big 5 media tech companies are taking off the top.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly a shifting paradigm in journalism, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's changed dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, I'm curious to ask you about, what do you think makes an effective business and media influencer? Because I know you have some thoughts there, so I'm wondering if you could share them with me.
I think that influencers, the way I talk about it in the book that I've written is called Trust Signals. And it talks about how there's what I describe as a continuum of influence today, starting with that individual customer review that someone reads up to kind of that customer ambassador who's a happy customer who's got a platform on social media and talking about their experience, to nano influencers, micro influencers, macro influencers, mega influencers, big mainstream media. And I think what businesses are challenged with doing is identifying which ones will help them most. And often for businesses, it's those smaller influencers that are passionate about a niche topic and have a niche audience that trusts them. And so finding an influencer who can believe in your business and honestly, authentically promote it, whether or not they're paid, that part doesn't matter, because today audiences of influencers, hey, they know influencers need to make a living, but they trust influencers who only endorse the products that they believe in. And they can tell pretty quickly if an influencer is just endorsing anything that where the brand pays them.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, let's talk for a minute about customer experiences. How do you think people can work to make those more memorable so that they can come back to continue to do business? Because, building relationships is a big part of customer experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that your customer experience is really how you define yourself as a brand, and that's from before someone becomes a customer, throughout their whole life cycle as a customer, and then even after they're not a customer or might come back as a customer later. It's having a consistency in how you present yourself, how you treat people. I think that brands many times, marketers get focused on things like the bells and whistles of having a cool looking logo, or an ad that is funny or has a celebrity in it or so forth. But the most important part of branding is being the same everywhere you go, talking in the same way, treating people the same way, so they know what to expect. And so, in terms of memorable experiences, we know the hotel that always gives you a warm chocolate chip cookie when you check in. And what happens is when people leave reviews for that hotel, they almost always mention that. That's a way to leave a memorable experience. And what they want to do is take those experiences and connect them to everything they do. So in that case, the hotel wants you to feel at home. It's almost like, you arrived at a relative's house and they made you something that's fresh out of the oven for when you arrive. They want everything in that experience to make you feel welcome and connected to them in that way, to the extent that they can, at every touch point, achieve that same feeling that they're trying to make you have. Then that's a really powerful brand.
Yeah, and I know that you built your PR agency Idea Grove off of your popular blog, and now it's one of the top tech PR firms in the United States. So I'm curious how you built your business on a blog, and how big you think blogging is in today's society.
Yeah, that's a good question. I started when I started the business 17 years ago. So at that time, blogging in professional context was not particularly, most people weren't doing it. And so it was related to politics and celebrity news and things like that. And only later, within a few years of when I started in 2005, did businesses begin to realize, oh, I need to be in this space too. I need to be on social media. I need to be blogging. So when I started, there were very few PR people who were blogging. What that did is, in terms of search results, it elevated me, and this was the first few years. Idea Grove was just me, but it elevated Idea Grove, which was just me, over all the big PR firms in the country and over all the big PR firms that had offices in Dallas in Google search results. And so I started getting calls. It was not an intentional SEO strategy to begin with. It was simply an effect of blogging. Now, of course, since then, blogging has been something that more and more businesses do. We recommend it for all our clients. Of course, a blog needs to include multimedia. It needs to include video. It can't just be written content anymore. And you also can't just, we strongly recommend not just trying to do it for SEO purposes, because there's so much Me Too content out there. So we recommend in your blog doing things like having original data, having a clear thought leadership point of view that you're consistent in sharing. Otherwise, your content is just going to get lost out there amid the sea of content. You've got to find things that are going to separate you. When I started, it was much easier to do that because there weren't as many people doing it. But today, you really have to have a very focused strategy, focused point of view, focused story if you want to get noticed.
Yeah, it's important not to get saturated, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the market is what it is, and in every industry, we work in B2B tech, and there's a lot of small, businesses that you would think, oh gosh, how many people are into this kind of supercomputing for this purpose or what have you? Well, the reality is we haven't been in a space where there isn't competition and where there aren't multiple players that are putting content out there. And so in that environment where things are saturated, you have to do something that's going to stand apart, or you're going to have limited impact with the content you create. And creating good content is hard. It takes time. And so you better have a strategy that's going to turn that into growing a brand or generating revenues.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Scott, I'm big into diversity, equity, and inclusion. Outside of hosting this podcast, I work with businesses to promote hiring people with disabilities. And I really think blogging and what we're doing this morning, podcasting, is the wave of the future for folks with a disability. So when you think about creating a diverse culture at work to boost camaraderie, I'm curious to what you think of.
Well, I can tell you about my own experience. We certainly have at Idea Grove, we've got a little over 30 people. We've got a pretty diverse group at this point. And a few years ago, we didn't. And I always thought, well, it's just worked out that way. We put our ads on LinkedIn. Our jobs, when we had openings, were open to all comers and so forth. But then I had a friend who was an agency owner in town. And I asked him one time, I said, I'd really like to make the team more diverse than it is. And I thought he might have some advice. And what he said was, you can't just hope it happens. You have to prioritize it. And you have to make that a specific objective that you are going after. So in other words, you're not just putting resumes in the usual places and hoping that you become more diverse. Because often, if you've got a staff that isn't diverse, sometimes a new person will come to your company. It's from a referral, and someone who, if it's not a diverse environment, the people who they recommend It's less likely it's going to be diverse in terms of the candidates that are brought in. So what he told me is, he said, he was African American, and he said, I can't. It's not like just through my network I'm going to be able to have a diverse agency. I decided that I was going to do what it took to create that. So he hired a recruiter. He found his COO. It was someone he didn't know in New York, also African American. But he had made the decision that he was going to prioritize it. So what that taught me is, you can't just hope it's going to happen. You have to make it happen. And so as a result, we brought in, we created a diversity team on our staff that has developed recommendations that we've implemented on improving diversity. We brought in a full-time recruiter, African American, who helped us identify places where jobs could be posted that we weren't aware of. And as a result of diversifying the places where we look for people, we've diversified the staff, but more importantly, we've made the staff better. And we have found people that we wouldn't have found otherwise. Because if you just keep doing things the old way, you're just going to keep getting the old results. So I would just say the big picture, what I always tell people when they ask about it, is if you don't focus specifically on making it happen, it's not going to happen. And that's really kind of applies to any goal you have in life. If you're just hoping it's just going to happen to you, it's just not going to happen. You have to make it happen.
Yeah, I always tell people, Scott, that it's important to prioritize the stuff that's important to us, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, Scott, you started a second blog called Trust Signals, which inspired a book, my friend. So I'm wondering if you can dive just a little bit deeper into the blog itself and how it inspired a book.
Yeah, well, it started from the idea sometime back that having gone from journalism into public relations, I kind of saw PR, as most people interpret it, as kind of almost a junior partner to the media business, a junior partner to journalism, where PR people were just hoping to get attention from media to confer trust on clients. And I realized that was not going to be sufficient anymore, because the media is fragmented. It used to be, hey, in a town like Dallas or any town, you're on the front. If you get a placement and get a client on the front page of the newspaper, that newspaper is going to be landing on people's doorsteps. Everybody's going to know, hey, you're on the front page of the paper. Who reads it? Who would even know today? What is the front page? It's just not like that. You have to try much harder to get in front of people. And you've got to figure out the right places to get in front of people. And so what Trust Signals is really about is stepping back and saying, okay, PR people used to say, focus, and clients used to want them to focus specifically on getting coverage in the media. But if that's not the most effective way to gain brand trust today, what are the most effective ways to gain brand trust? And so I started stepping back, and I put together a list of well over 100 different trust signals, from trust badges like a Better Business Bureau seal on your website, to getting customer reviews, how you respond to customer reviews, having a thought leadership strategy, working on your search presence in ways that not only bring traffic to your website, but burnish your brand reputation, all of those things. And so what I've really tried to do is interpret digital marketing and the online world today through the eyes and through the objectives of public relations. And so the idea is to give PR people that have kind of painted themselves in a corner by focusing so much on media relations, give them a much broader toolkit to work from in terms of the ways to help their clients achieve the visibility, awareness, and trust they're seeking when they come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Scott, my final question for you has to do with your own individual and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I have 5 kids between 2 and 15, and most of what I think about in terms of impact and the impact I want to have is like for my kids and through my kids. But in terms of, professionally, what I hope that the book and the work we're doing at my agency is called Idea Grove, and we work mostly with tech companies. I hope that we can help move the PR industry forward because I think PR has been diminished over time relative to marketing. It's almost considered kind of a subset to marketing when originally the idea was they were meant to be parallel and equivalent disciplines. But I think that that's been allowed to kind of fade. And so my legacy, I hope, is to elevate and modernize, or at least help elevate and modernize the PR profession. And my hope is that the book and some of the work we're doing is helping with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, if people want to get connected with you personally or Idea Grove, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, our agency, Idea Grove, is at Idea Grove, like in orangegrove.com. And the Trust Signal site is trustsignals.com. You can find links to, if you want to find out about the book there. Right now, we're doing excerpts. So we're for free. You can read each week. We're posting one chapter. And soon we're going to have, if you look for, it's not out there now, but soon the Trust Signals podcast, where we're going to be putting all the chapters from the book, from the audiobook, that out there as a podcast as well. So that'll all be available for free. Obviously, I'd love for you to buy the book, but more importantly, I just want people to get this information, and hopefully it's helpful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott, I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with me this morning to talk about public relations, journalism, media, and everything in between, my friend. I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, Kevin. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me.